So let me tell you just who I am and what I'm doing. And so I met you, well, I was in the room when you came and talked to Leadership Evanston this year. So I was in Leadership Evanston, and our project that we were given was violence. It was just violence and safety in Evanston. And so we narrowed it down and we started talking about youth violence. And so we have a Facebook page called Dear Evanston.
I've seen that.
And so I work on it like 25,000 hours a day. And I wish
saw
it
the
was...
one that you did on Gigi Giles.
Yes.
Yeah, I talked to Janet afterwards because she panicked a little bit. Like,
Why?
all right, she took the article that I wrote in Shorefront Journal, and is that okay? I'm like, yes, that's the whole point of like electronic posting.
It's called publicity.
As long as they credit where it's coming from, I'm fine with it. I mean, we're not so strict. I mean, it's meant to be out there to be read and passed on.
Right.
I only have problems with sites that don't credit where it came from.
Yeah.
And I had to call a few of them and say, look, either you take it down or you credit it properly.
No, I mean, the whole thing behind Dear Evanston, it's like a sort of a twofold thing. One is, and it's so frustrating because, I mean, we have like almost 2,500 followers, but I really wished we had 25,000 followers. Because I think, especially me, you know, until I did Leadership Evanston, I've always done sort of social justice-y things, and I worked for the Anti-Defamation League, and I've done, you know, diversity stuff and all that. So I've done it. Then I had my kids, and I kind of went into myself. And we've lived in Evanston, but I never really knew Evanston. Like, I just did my white Evanston thing, and you know what I mean? Like, I didn't really know it. And I didn't really think about it. There were black people, okay, but they're not my people. These are my people. And I did Leadership Evanston because I'm on the board of Kurt's Cafe.
Yeah.
So, and I've worked at a thing in Chicago called Jobs for Youth. So it's always been my thing. But I just didn't get really involved. And then with Dear Evanston, I started like digging deeper into this community and like how amazing it is, and how few people, especially white people, don't even think about Black Evanston, and that it's got this history, and that it's got this really rich history, because I didn't know about it. So I really want to tell the world. I'd never heard of Shorefront Legacy Center. I'm sure half the people, if not more,
still don't know. We've been around
my friends.
Yeah, we've been around for 20 years, more than 20 years now. Well, we were formulated in 2002, but I started this research back in 1995.
Right.
And, you know, I always looked it up as, you know, if it's not in your interest, you're not going to pay attention. So, like, I'm not interested in pottery. So I want to think, well, I don't know if there's any pottery shops. And one day I'm interested in pottery, and I see a pottery shop. I'm like, oh, there's one on Main Street. I didn't know there was one there, you know. So it's kind of more, that's how I kind of look at it.
That's exactly right. And so for me, my passion is opening people's eyes to, really? I wasn't interested, but now I'm interested. So I wish I had a wider audience, but that's exactly what I want to do. I want to, took her story, I didn't change it. I had Gigi do a little blurb, and then I just printed her story and said her name.
You did perfectly fine, so I let her know that it's perfectly fine.
And I want to interview her, in fact. But so what I'm doing is, it's twofold, threefold. It's telling stories of Evanston. It's talking about violence in Evanston. So it's like posting when things happen. Like this past weekend, it was terrible. Like 4 shootings in this weekend. Posting that just as information. You know, talking a little bit about gun control stuff, which is less Evanston. It's more, you know, national. So I do a little bit of that. And then, what's the other thing? Sort of just opening people's eyes to the broader Evanston. So what I want to ask you is, if there's a story that's already written about you, I would love to just post it so that I don't have to sit here and make you tell me your whole...
Something fell back there. It's all right.
Or I can just ask you some questions and then
I always say go ahead and ask, because I think the information always needs to be updated anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, there have been stories written about us, but, you know, throughout the year, the stories have been written about Shorefront.
For sure, yeah.
But, I always like fresh approaches anyway, so.
Okay. Well, so then there are a few things that I want to ask you. I want to ask you who you are and a little bit about your family. Then I want to ask you about Shorefront. And then I want to ask you about your opinions on what's going on in the community regarding violence.
Sure.
In Evanston.
Sure.
So where should we start?
I'll start with my family.
Start with your family.
All right.
Okay.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my family. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for my family. So my roots are in South Carolina and Missouri. My grandmother was born and raised in South Carolina, outside of Anderson, in a place called Sandy Springs. Um, my father was born in Missouri, although most of his family was here in Chicago area. But his mom went traveling to visit relatives in Missouri, and actually his side of the family is like Missouri and Arkansas. But he went on when they went to visit Missouri. That's where he was born.
Huh.
And
It's like me. I was born in Chicago.
Back, and then he came back to. Then the family came back to Chicago. It was just an extended stay because I think where he was like, there was a flood there, so they couldn't really get out.
Huh.
And so he was there.
Wow.
My mother was born in Chicago. My dad was, like I said, Missouri. My mom grew up in Inglewood. Went to Inglewood High School. My grandmother went to Inglewood High School, although she, migrated from the South. And in many ways, knowing my family history, and my parents and my families have always talked about family history, I kind of had a sense of, knowing I am part of the American fabric.
Do you think it's unusual that families talk about the history?
No, I don't think it's unusual. I always don't think it's. I think inherently we all hear it. It's just that I liked history, so I paid closer attention. I mean, we learn a lot of things from our families and parents. A lot of kids absorb a lot of things that we don't realize they're absorbing. So with me, it was history. So every time somebody talks about something in the past, I may, as a kid, I may not look like I'm interested. I might be doing something else, but I'm listening to them.
I know, you're right.
And
Grabbing up. Is that
yeah, I'll grab one.
I don't know what happened to it.
So,
Oh, sorry.
This one I think works a lot pretty well.
Thank you.
So for me, it was always about that. But I think my pivotal moment in just really taking an interest in history was visiting my grandmother in South Carolina. And I tell this story a lot. So, it's 102 degrees outside, 104 degrees inside. They didn't believe in air conditioning. So we had a hot fan blowing on me. It's a rural part of South Carolina. So nothing to do but, you can go down to the creek and fish if you want to. You can ride a bike. We had a TV in there, but it was like 3 channels. I Love Lucy marathons running all day long.
What year is this?
This is 80s, early 80s. And roughly around the time where we moved to Evanston, I was getting ready to enter high school.
So where did you move from?
Well, my track for me, when I was born in Chicago. Relocated to Italy. My dad was stationed there during Vietnam.
Wow.
Moved back to Chicago. Then Glenview, then Evanston. So in Glenview, I integrated my school. That was fun.
Really?
That's a whole different discussion.
Oh my God. Okay, you'll have to tell. We have to talk
that was
about
during
it.
the '70s, and yeah, I had run the gamut with any race relation type things. I had teachers tell me I'm unable to learn because I'm black, and another teacher trying to convince my parents that I need to see a psychologist or psychiatrist because there's something wrong with him.
At Glenview?
Yeah, in Glenview. So yeah, it's but I had enough awareness about myself that I knew something was not wrong with me; it was something wrong with them. So it did affect me, but but I did have that thought.
So what grade were you in? High school?
My first I guess exposure to racism was kindergarten.
That's early.
And it was pretty direct. It wasn't anything subtle. It was a kid that basically came and kicked me in the stomach and said, "Niggas not allowed to play with toys."
In Chicago?
No, this is in Glenview.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So that was my introduction. That was my introduction to racism.
What did you say? What did you do?
I shut down that day. So I didn't say anything. The teacher was like, a few feet away from me. She kind of saw it, kind of turned her head, didn't say anything else. right? Because I looked to her like, well, what's going to happen? What do I do? And she said nothing. So I shut down for the rest of the day. I didn't tell my parents till years later what happened. But also that same night was shaped me in many ways. I was upset. I cried when I got home.
But you didn't say why.
No, I mean I didn't tell them. They didn't see. My parents didn't see me cry. I mean I kind of kept it to myself. Went to bed, cried a bit. Then I got mad. I said, I'm crying too much. And that kid and nobody has any right to call me that and do that to me.
You knew that?
Yeah. And then I thought to myself too that he didn't learn that on his own. He learned that from his parents. And from that day on, I said nobody's going to get away with it again. And I figured it can go three ways. I could have really become reclusive and have it affect me in that way. I could have been extremely angry and rebellious and act out in that way, or empower myself. And I chose to empower myself. Mm-hmm. So I kind of knew inherently to stand up for myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I saw my dad do. I mean, he was a strong, he was working in corporate. He was a VP at one point at a bank. My mom was a school teacher, so she was always about education. The daily activity was, my dad comes home. The first thing, after talking to mom was to, come up to us and say, let me check your homework. Your standards are too low. You need to raise your standards. This is what defines who you are. So that was repetitive over and over and over again through our educational career. Now, were we still our students? No, not exactly.
Yeah, I have two children. I have two sons.
We all struggled here, but I had my strengths and I had my weaknesses, like every kid does. I really wasn't interested. I was interested in arts, so I did a lot of creative stuff. And my profession was in advertising and design, but my second interest was history. And
where did you go to college?
Loyola University, Chicago.
So your career is what?
Advertising.
Advertising career.
It's advertising design. I was an art director.
Design. Are you still?
No, not anymore. I'm production manager at Northwestern University Press.
Let's go back a second because I steered you off course. You were talking about your grandmother and the moment, the fans.
So that moment, I was in that heated living room, and my grandmother had this bookcase, probably about the size of something like that, the brown one, and it had about 14 photo albums in there, and I just picked one up and started leafing through it. When I look back on it more closely, when I went back to them at later years, is that she had each one individual. My grandmother was one of 7 siblings, and she had a photo album for each of her siblings, including herself. And she had one for her husband. And she had one for various groups like general family history as well. So I was going through these photo albums and leafing through them, and I just see pictures of black and white pictures of old dead people. 13-year-old mind.
Totally.
But it's something to look at, something to do. My grandmother was in the kitchen, doing her, dishes and folding aluminum foil and, and just make sure everything was clean and getting her candy out of her jar, saw what I was doing. And she dried off her hands, sat next to me, turned back to the first page and said, "This is your great-great-grandfather, and this is what he did on the docks in South Carolina." That just opened up my world. And just the stories behind each one. Like, this is what so what it taught me is that, the narrative I learned growing up in school basically is that we were once slaves and Dr. King freed us. That's pretty much the dialogue. And you sum it up in 1 or 2 pages in the history book. Out of a 300-page history book, that's all we get is 1 or 2 pages.
In 28 days.
Yeah, in 28 days, right. So that just kind of opened my world of thought of we were a lot more than that. We were part of American history. This is not a subset history. And that stayed with me. So I started questioning. Everywhere I was in school, I started questioning things like, I remember specifically taking, a test and Christopher Columbus discovered America. I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. How do you discover something where people are already there? That doesn't make any sense. So, even looking at U.S. history from there, westward expansion, I started making up my own subtitles, or the slaughter of Native American Indians, Industrial Revolution, child labor, So I really started looking at alternate views of a storyline. So as I'm reading this and what we're supposed to be reading and learning and what we're going to be tested on, I'm asking questions in between the lines. This doesn't make sense. Who is telling the story?
Did you get into trouble? Like, were you?
Yeah, the Christopher Columbus one I got in trouble. I told him, this question, there are no right questions on here. He did not discover America. And I remember the teacher yelling at me for being a smart ass.
And was that at Glenview?
This is in Glenview. For being a smart ass. And I said, I'm not trying to be a smart ass. I'm trying to learn something. It doesn't make any sense to me how you're saying that Christopher Columbus, and then she cut me off and said, that's what's in the history book. That's what's in the lesson plan. That's what you better put down, or I'm marking it wrong. I said, well, I guess you have to mark it wrong then, because he did not discover it.
And what did other kids say?
They're kind of quiet, and they just kind of looked at me and looked back to the teacher, and they kept their head down. But I knew I'd get it wrong, and I'd rather, just for integrity, I'd rather have had it wrong, knowing that, I'm right.
I mean, I posted something on Dear Evanston yesterday. I had never, until, 3 days ago, and I don't even know how I figured it out, I'd never heard of Juneteenth. I'd never heard of Juneteenth. I mean, I've lived here since 1978. No one ever told me what Juneteenth was. And I'm like, why don't we do something?
A bigger thing is that Juneteenth is more heavily celebrated in the South than the North. So it's catching on in the North more and more. And
shouldn't it be celebrated in the North?
And the reason why it's Juneteenth.
Because it's June the 19th and it was the proclamation.
Well, but it also took several days for various areas of the South to get that information. So there's no exact date when slaves knew they were free.
Right.
They knew it was in the June, around that time, so they say Juneteenth celebration.
I was like, I think Evanston needs to do something. Like, I think we should do something.
Well, like Hecky Powell's doing something right now. Like, every year he does something.
Yeah.
Last year, Hecky did something, and Fleetwood Jourdain Center did something. And actually, I have this written
But who
piece.
shows up? Do white people show up?
Only a few, handful. Again, it's one of those things like, do people, is it in their purview to care?
No.
But and that brings a broader discussion of.
Aren't you frustrated that people don't know about this?
Oh, I'm frustrated on many levels on a lot of things on this, but I also still know it's important to continue the struggle with it. I know within the communities that we do reach, they're extremely grateful that we're here. What's interesting is that other communities, other states, recognize us more, and organizations recognize us more than our own hometown that this is housed in. You would think that this is a gold mine, but other institutions are giving us awards of what we're doing, and other in some places are treating us as like the model institution of what a community archive would look like and how it should operate. So it's interesting that a lot of great things that you're learning that had happened here had largely been ignored and written out of history, but were very significant. So, and part of our philosophy with Shorefront is kind of multi-level. One is to present this history as American history, because that's what it is. It's American history. It's not a subset.
It's not Black history.
Yeah, it's not a subset. Now, our focus is on Black history, but this is American history.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
The second thing we really try hard on is that the Black community needs to own and control its message, and through our lens. So, and sometimes I've gotten into interesting coded meaning heated.
I got that. Yeah.
Discussions about diversity in Evanston, and the common one that comes up all the time is, well, Evanston was the first to desegregated schools. I'm like, yeah, the writing was on the wall. You had no choice. So you wanted to do is manage it yourself.
Wait, who's saying this? White Evanston?
White Evanston. So
do you ever get into heated conversations with Black Evanston about owning and controlling the message? Like, what's the message?
Not so much that is who is supposed to know the history. It comes to that. So me being a newcomer to Evanston, for example.
How long have you been here for?
I've been here now for over 30 years.
Oh.
But I'm still a newcomer.
Right, you didn't
grow up
100 years
here.
ago.
Right, I wasn't born here. I don't have ancestry here. There are families that have donated to our
100.
archives that have been here for multiple generations.
Right.
Who themselves didn't really realize the impact their ancestry had here. Some do, many do, but there are some especially peers now, kids now have no idea that their great grandfather did X, Y, Z. They may have heard something my parents said, but we didn't pay no mind to it. Things like that. Again, what I said earlier, kids are listening, but they're not soaking it in until it gets to a point of their own mortality is in question. Their mother and father dies. They had a grave illness. All of a sudden, like, oh my God, I want to know my family history. Like, yeah, you should have been talking about this since you were a kid. We would have had a lot more stuff here, But so what we get challenged on a lot is about the accuracy of the history. Like, well, so and so was the first black police officer in 1930, and I'll say, yeah, but what about the person in 1898? And so what we're trying to do is create a more comprehensive timeline where it's no longer a traveling timeline that kind of travels along this time code according to that person's life experience.
So was there a black police chief in the 18?
Not a police chief, police officer in 1898. Yes, Sandy Trent.
Because I know it's Wilson.
Yeah, there's
Logan.
Logan was the first black police chief. Yes, yeah. But before that, first black police detective was Hank White. The first black policewoman, I can't remember her name offhand, but she was there in the 1920s, and she had to service women who were incarcerated. But some of the same rules apply. If you're a black police officer, you can go into a white community and arrest somebody; they wouldn't let you do it. I'm not going to be arrested by a black person. Coded differently, but
So first thing is to present the history as history, and the second is controlling the message. And you said there's a third.
Building an archive, so there's a permanence. Sometimes I get these fun phone calls of, I hear you do this history and you have no information on so-and-so. Why don't you have that information? I said, well, we can't conjure it out of thin air, so somebody knows about it. So do you know about it? Yeah, I grew up with them. Do you have any information on them? Oh, yeah, I do. Do you like to share that? No, I don't. Well, then how are we supposed to know?
That's weird.
So so we do a lot of education in community. So we really advocate for families to care for their own history. And we kind of give, points and tips of how to do that. Designate someone younger than the elder in the family to be the next in line and help them along and show and hand it over to them. Not like you can come over and look at it, but I'm not going to hand it over yet. Hand it over to them. Make them responsible for something. So that you can see how they're performing, you teach them along the way, and it passes on. Don't wait till after the person dies, and then you're in the household. You have all these things, and like, well, I have no idea what they are. So we're just going to toss it because we have no idea what it is.
I have so many photos. My family came from Eastern Europe, and I have no idea who these old people are. I keep all of them, but and it makes me so sad. Like their blood is running through my veins.
Right.
Like one day I'm going to be be and people are going to be like, who is this?
Yeah, your kids are going to come by and say, what's this?
Yeah.
Like, where are these old people?
Where are
these old people, right?
It's terrible.
So, building an archive so that people can come back and do research, and look into what was a community like in this northern suburb. Now we have firsthand documentation from families who are donating things to the
And
archive.
who comes? Like only Evanstonians or people from all over the country?
All over the country. We have scholars that have come here to work on their books, their dissertations, their articles. We had, sometimes it's over the phone. I helped author Rachel Swarns, who wrote the book American Tapestry, which is on Michelle Obama's family history. And she was just, asking general questions about Evanston, the makeup of Evanston, Black Evanston specifically. She reached out actually to some other descendants of Evanston who were directly related to Michelle Obama.
Right.
And it turns out that her great grandmother, great grandmother lived in Evanston in the 1920s. And who's to say that she would have stayed here if possibly we did not basically decimate that, raise that whole community over there. It was over by Haven School. There was a black community.
Yeah,
and at one point, the residents there were told that you have 1 week to vacate or your house is going to get leveled.
So that's
where she lived, and she had her and her husband had a shoe repair shop.
So there was an African American community around Haven. When?
Around the 1920s. But there were like pockets of African American communities. So it's not what we see today wasn't Evanston, 100 years ago. We had pockets of communities just throughout. Everybody lived everywhere. So it wasn't like a Jewish community, a German community, a Polish community, a white community. People were, no, of course, along the lakefront, it's a wealthier houses.
Right.
But in general, I mean, if you think of these areas, I mean, we were on the outskirts of like the Evanston border right now. So this would have been considered North Evanston.
But blacks were still not allowed to live among whites, like what Jews weren't either.
Well, some were. I mean, there were some pockets elsewhere, like on where Forest Avenue and Dempster.
Yeah.
There was a black community there.
And so they said everybody's going to move and go and live in this particular area.
Yeah,
and
basically just like redlined everything and said, if you're black, let's say, and there were different ways they did it. It's like real estate agents refused to sell blacks and Jews and Polish and German in certain areas of the neighborhood. They would up the standards of housing codes, and so if I'm black and I'm living near the lakefront and I have this house that didn't have indoor plumbing, I have to put indoor plumbing in now. I'll go to the bank to try and get a bank loan to do it. Banks were not going to lend me any money to do so. So then I'm forced to sell the house below market. I want to buy a new house. Then the real estate agent said, well, we can sell you a new house, but we want to sell you over here. Well, I want to live over here. We're not selling it to you. You can live over there, take it or leave it, or just get out of Evanston altogether. There have been articles about pushing blacks out of Evanston.
Some people think that that's happening now, that there's an attempt.
Well, there's always discussion about it. Things, sometimes tactics change. The word that's used all the time now is gentrification. And there's some real good, strong evidence of how that happens. It's a model of let's transform this community to make it ours. So let's put up the Starbucks and we'll go into this home and immediately do major renovations. So that way their property tax jumps up. And because their property tax jumps up, all the surrounding houses' property taxes go up as well. So and more and more houses you do that, then all the property taxes go up.
And then
you have people who have to start can't live there anymore because they can't afford to live there. And then there's also a change of attitude of like, I'm walking down the street and I see, a police car pulls up next to me and says, we had a report that there was somebody casing the neighborhood. I'm like, I live here. And it turns out the new neighbor that's coming in reports everything. If there's more than two people of color walking around, it's suddenly a gang. And and this is happening across the country right now. There are lots of stories and reports of people documenting the gentrification of their communities.
It's a big thing.
Who cannot live there anymore because they're threatened by the new people coming in and pushing them out by various means, joining, forming like block clubs, but not inviting the natives that were there. Just the new people that are coming in, starting businesses by locking others out, getting loans and locking everybody else out. So all these resources coming in and really barricading that so only a select group can have access to that and the rest can't until we force everybody out so that the margin goes down to less than 10%, then we're good.
Do you think is that happening in Evanston?
I think in some aspects it is. When I look at, but it's also, it's kind of a tiered thing. I see things with like economy and community development. Sometimes there's some fine plans that can happen, for example, in the Fifth Ward, and they tend to get tanked or ignored. I mean, I could cite a few examples. There used to be a West Side Library branch. That closed. But they cited, lack of visitation. But South Branch also had the same issue. But the library decided to keep that open, but close the West Branch. Now that was indicative of the school closing over there, and because the school closed, then that branch closes. Foster School. So.
But that was way before this branch library closed.
Well, that closed, and then the branch library closed after that. Because where's the student body when you have everybody being bussed out?
And then they voted down a school.
And then the business that were there, everybody's gone. There's no activity. So you have a dead zone. And so, when the referendum came out, which was very interesting, seeing some of the voting around all of Evanston, those who had no idea what was going on, and so they voted no because they just didn't understand what was going on. Yet other communities are trying to make decisions for this community. Well, we know what's better for you, but in essence, they're trying to protect two things: their property tax or their overall taxes in Evanston, and the diversity in their own school. Some people were using the term, saying, well, if we put a school back in the Fifth Ward, we're going to essentially resegregate our schools. But they're not seeing the demographics have changed. So it's no longer a 99% black ward. It's a different mix. So when you have something there that can stimulate a neighborhood, then you have more economic growth. You have more housing growth. You have this change of guard. You could attract new families in there, new young families in there to take over these houses that have been boarded up, for example.
And there's even part of, sometimes I think, like this is the way they desegregated. It wasn't really thought through very well, because all the kids who went to foster school had to be shipped out. Right. So, I mean, it was desegregation, but they lost their tie to their own community. So, in a way, it's half a black school. Like,
it's a rinse and repeat, because they did that with the hospital, they did that with the Black YMCA, and nationally overall. I mean, this is what it seems like when the communities started talking about desegregating. It was always at the expense of the black communities or the communities of color. Let's make a better facility for everyone. So let's build this brand new facility in this white middle class neighborhood and close the one in the black neighborhood. And then we'll provide shuttle services to that community. Then after a couple of years, we have to start charging a fee now. So what used to be free and walkable now becomes inaccessible with a fee attached to it. And then, of course, you go to the news center, and every activity there has a fee. So now it becomes so structured. What happened to the unstructured playtime? Kids need that. I mean, everything doesn't have to be structured, with a fee and a trained, teacher to show you how to play softball. No, give a ball and a bat, go out in the field and play softball. You can't have an organized sport in Evanston at a parking lot without first getting a permit from the city. That's crazy. Now, Evanston's trying to promote, this is going to be a biking community. But if you start putting proposals and ideas of trying to find ways of taxing or licensing bicycles, and then a kid, my daughter was going out trying to ride a bicycle, and I wanted to ride on the sidewalk. And it was like, well, she can't ride on the sidewalk, she can ride on the street. Yeah, with these crazy drivers, are you kidding me? My kid's trying to learn how to ride a bicycle? How is this a bike-friendly city? I'd rather have kids ride on a bicycle. If you teach them rules of the road like I learned, have a bell, whistle, hey, coming to your left, coming to your right. This one funny conversation came up. I think it was one of the first times I paid attention to Evanston stuff. I was still in high school. Evanston Review, and people along the lakefront started complaining that these bicycles down this trail on the lakefront, they're a nuisance. We should stop bicycles on this trail. It should be for walkers and strollers. Yeah, and the stories will come out. Yeah, a bicycle almost hit my baby in the stroller, and walkers like, I was almost run down by a bicycler. After about several weeks of this, somebody finally wrote in and said, it's a bike trail. Not a pedestrian trail. Not a stroller trail. It's a bicycle trail.
That's hilarious. That's really hilarious.
And I'm thinking, what is wrong with these people?
That's actually hysterical. Oh my god, it's kind of exhausting, all this stuff. So okay, I'm trying to.
I'm sorry,
going all over this. It's so interesting, though. So,
the whole point of this, though, is complex.
It's so complex.
And is there a one path for everything that's happening? Is there one cause that's making something happen, like gentrification, like our education, like crime? No, it's multi-tiered, and it happens on a daily basis, over and over and over again. It's tiring. You don't know which one to fight first, because you have to fight them all at the same time, at multiple levels. So as long as the power structure is not diverse enough, that has great representation, if funding and community building is not spread out for the entire city of Evanston, because Evanston is only 8 square miles. It's not big.
It's insane to me.
So when you have, aldermen, talking about, I have to serve my constituencies. I'm like, you mean 5 blocks?
Right.
Whatever you do in this ward affects everybody.
So what would you do, to breathe life into the Fifth Ward without it being gentrified? How would you? What's the answer to that?
invest in it, just like you would invest in everything else. There's ways to do that. I mean, the city has funding sources, access to funding sources that, as a whole, can take a bigger, broader plan. If we want to improve a community and do certain things, let's make that part of our bigger plan and put money behind it, whether it's bonds, mixed with grants, mixed with partnerships. I mean, I could see this place being at street level. There's nothing that duplicates this anywhere north of DuSable Museum.
Right.
It can become a destination place.
And why isn't
if we have
why can't it?
It's people are not interested in it. If it became like a major interest, let's say if suddenly Shorefront gains the attention of Smithsonian Museum nationally, and says this is a great place, we're going to invest money. Then the city's going to be like, oh yeah, we were behind this too. We were behind it all along.
So before somebody from the outside acknowledges it, I mean, I understand that it's like, so your kid does something and you're like, oh, my kid's a good musician, and then somebody comes and goes, your kid's an amazing musician. You're like, oh, my kid's an amazing musician.
Right, exactly.
But what about? I mean, maybe this because I'm kind of ignorant, but what about first of all the wealthier African Americans, like a Hickey or I don't know, people.
Everybody's so. I mean, if you look at the leadership, and I have a tremendous respect for the leadership that's in Evanston. For somebody to go and put themselves out there in the open for critique, I have respect. Even if I don't like what they're doing, I have a tremendous respect for everyone that does, because it's a hard thing. It's a thankless. A lot of times it's thankless. I mean, I put myself out there with this, and I've gotten backlash. I'm not doing it for myself. I'm doing it for a community. So my bigger goal is I want my community to be a strong, well-educated, well-informed environment. And when I say community, I'm talking about all of Evanston, all of the North Shore.
What kind of backlash do you get?
Generally it's just like the sense of ownership of. I think there's perceptions that this is my private collection. No, I'm not taking any of this stuff back in the house. My wife would kill me.
I mean, you share it.
My goal was never to have this as a private thing.
But it could be if you wanted it to be.
If I wanted it to be a private thing, I could do whatever I want. I don't have to have a board. I answer to a board.
Right.
Now the board listens to me a lot.
So you're a 501c3?
Yeah, we're a 501c3. We have a board. We have a board of advisors, and we have an honorary board. And yes, going back to your question, there are some wealth people with deep pockets. Also keep in mind that they've also had a lifetime of advocacy, and people always asking for something, and they've seen things succeed. They've seen many more fail before they succeed. So a lot of times it's the approach of, oh, here's another person approached me for more money. That gets tiring. So I've always tried to approach like, here's the value of Shorefront. Do with it, support it in ways that you think is, appropriate. Now, would you love to have deep pockets? Yes, because these same people say, why don't you just write a grant? And I have to explain to them, I can't write a grant without financial support from the community. Because the first thing they're going to ask is, what is the match? How is your community supporting? So let's say in a given year from the community, we're given through various things $2,000. Guess what grant I could write? A $2,000 grant. So we have $4,000 to work with.
So how do you get funded now?
Various grants. Some private family foundations, some larger ones. We apply for about 6 or 7 grants a year. We basically operate on $25,000 a year budget, usually a little less than that. No paid staff. We're all volunteer. But we provide a lot of resources. Now, we were trying to find things and do things to monetize it. We do have publications that we sell. We do speaking engagements that we have a fee for. We market that toward institutions. We speak a lot of times for free because we think the information is important. If it's a small, girls group, I'm not going to charge this girl group something, But I might ask them, like, did you find this interesting? Can you write a letter?
And are most people who come here African American or
all over?
So a lot of white people?
White, black, Hispanic. I mean,
and kids.
Kids have come here and do school reports.
But there's no field trip from ETHS.
Field trips. We've had field trips from camps, summer camps. Some a junior high class. The senior, what's that? The independent study group and senior in high school.
Senior studies.
Senior studies. They've come regularly, actually, every year. And we showcase what we do with archiving and archiving practice.
And how did you
we
learn
did
all
have the
that?
entire history department come here.
Of ETHS?
Of ETHS. They were just jaws just dropped.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like...
You know, I think they were slated to stay here for an
hate
hour. They stayed
finding-
here for 3.
well, like I could sit here for like 5 hours because the two things that have sort of blown my mind, a lot of things have blown my mind, just getting to know people. But this blows my mind, even though I've known about it since I met you at the leadership agency thing. But also, there's this theatre at Family Focus. There's this theatre. Have you seen it?
Oh yeah, I've been. Shorefront used to be over there. Shorefront used to be over there, so we're across from that. And that was the birthplace. That's where when Fleetwood Jordan Theater. That was their first home for a while.
And now it's just this awesome theatre, and it's just sitting there, and no one's using it. And I'm like, this has to be a jazz club or a blues club or a. I'm like,
And what's interesting is still the mentality of people going into the area saying it's like we don't want to go in that area. It's dangerous.
That's
I'm like,
my
dangerous?
job. That's
So
like,
what's dangerous about it?
That's my
Danger is
mission.
only if you seek it out. I mean, when I was going to high school, people used to say, you know, other families would say, "Oh, you're at the Evanston Township. What's the gang like?" I'm like, okay, I rarely see them. I know who some of them are. Guess what they do? When I'm walking down the hall, they say, "Don't go down that way. Some trouble's about to start." They protect me. Rival gang members saying, "Dino, don't go down there because we know you're about school. You're not about our lifestyle." So if you choose an activity that lends to that, that's what you're going to attract. If you're gonna hang out with the Doctor Who club, guess what? You'll be hanging out with Doctor Who club people.
They might be more dangerous. No.
So I put that in that perspective. If your kid is going to seek out danger, no matter what environment you put them in, guess what they're going to do? You're going to find them in the dangerous parts of the neighborhoods or organization or community or whatever. That's what you're going to find them in.
Well, I think people think it's like, they would just be a bystander. There's a shot
Random
rings
shooting.
out and it hits you
Well,
by mistake.
that's why it's called random shooting.
Right,
It can happen anywhere.
right.
You can trip down the sidewalk and crack your head open.
I mean, I think that the key is to get some really cool things going on that isn't gentrifying because the neighborhood should own it, but it should be so damn sexy that scared white people just have to cross the border.
Right.
I mean, I really that is my obsession. I don't know how to do it. I'm not an entrepreneur. But I
There
think
was
about this
a good
all the
discussion. I
time.
gotta look at this again. Every so often I come across it online. There was a speaker that talked about racism in the United States, and her audience was predominantly white. She's an African American woman, and she had posed 2 questions. She said the first question was, I'm paraphrasing, in what ways does racism affect people of color? And everybody's raising their hand. Housing, education, jobs. I mean, you name it, a gauntlet of 25. I mean, she was going on and on. She called all the afternoon and said these things. And then she said, now, explain to me how racism is affecting whites. Dead silence. A few hands went up. What it came down to was fear.
And guilt.
And like, fear of what? Fear of retaliation. Fear that I'm going to lose my privileges. Fear of that. That's where it stems from. So you're trying so hard to fight for what you want to keep at the expense of other humans. Based on color? Are you kidding me? So, and people who have grown up all their lives thinking, what do you see on TV growing up? If it's somebody white, oh, they're great, they're pure, they're this, they're honest, and they're successful. Black, oh, they're evil, they're bad, they're uneducated, they're mean, they're dishonest. And that's the message. If that's the message you see on TV all the time, then when you meet somebody in person and they don't fit that mold of what you grew up to be, you're like confused as hell. Like, wait, you're not like what I saw. Well, TV is fake, first of all, but
Yeah, totally.
but at the same time, it's like if you don't have that exposure, then you already have these preconceived notions, and then you can start thinking back, like, damn, what did I learn in school? Was everything a lie? There was another blog writer that wrote about that too, about Black history. So I don't celebrate a white woman. So I'm talking about I don't celebrate Black history and I don't like Black history. But she quantified it by saying that because it shows the information that I learned about white history was all wrong. So I want Black history talked about and celebrated every single day of the year because it is American history, and I'm tired of the lies that I was spoon-fed my entire life about U.S. history. So she was really pissed and of how that happened. And understandably, I mean, you're spending a lot of money going to school, and you know,
Learning the wrong thing.
in essence you've been propagandized.
Totally.
So then and you're supposed to be a history major. There was another blog article that came out a couple of months ago. Doctors, people studying medicine and become doctors. They said it's unbelievable how many believed in just certain myths of racial people. Blacks don't feel pain as much as whites do. So we tend to medicate them less because they don't need it. Or their thin is thicker, so we have to cut deeper into it, or they don't bruise as easy. It's like these are all like myths. And it goes back to a long time. I didn't know your blood is red just like mine. We're human. We're not comparing porpoises and
and their blood's all red too.
Yeah, it's all red, you know, and porpoise brain is probably smarter than us as it is.
God.
They're smart enough to know that we're not coming out of the water. You guys are foolish. Stay out of the ocean, we're good, okay?
It's quite unbelievable. So I want to go back to your family, but talk a little bit about violence, since we touched on it, people being afraid. What do you think is going on today? I mean, you look at Chicago, and it's like I don't even think.
I think it's simply easy. It's resources are taken away. What do you think is going to happen? When you close schools, community centers, libraries, the jobs that are down there are just liquor stores and convenience stores on the corner. What does it do?
And it's the same thing in Evanston.
There are no parks, or the parks are there, it's concrete or poorly maintained. If everybody's paying taxes in Chicago, but the bulk of us, maintaining the immediate downtown area or these very, certain enclaves or communities in Chicago, and ignoring a large swath of families, of communities, that's the problem.
Is it the same in Evanston?
There are parts of that.
There
are parts of a lot of different things. I think there's also parts of families trying to escape Chicago and coming here, but also bring an element here. I think there's an element that, if you look at some of the reports too, I mean, a lot of times you're going to find it's not an Evanston person committing something, it's someone from the outside committing something in Evanston.
And you think that, even though do you think they don't have ties to Evanston?
They may.
Yeah.
Families may. I mean, it could be, acquaintanceship, it could be family related. It could be just somebody trying to set up territory up here and coming across other resistance or quote unquote competition.
And so most of the violence is like, when I was looking this morning, it's like 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 16-year-old. Do you think they know their history? Do you think it would help if they knew their history?
I think it would help a lot if people knew their history, other than, we were once slaves and King freed us, so to speak. I think it's, how we teach in class. I mean, schools can play a big part in subtleties. I talked about my experience a bit of it, but, I had a bad experience here at Evanston Township when I went here. My first high school counselor was not the right person for me. But at least I pointed that out very early, and my dad corrected that. Because we had to go in our freshman year and talk to our counselors about, what do we aspire to be. And at that time, I wanted to be an architect. At the time, I was doing a lot of mechanical drawing classes and entering competitions and winning, getting first, second place on, like, Illinois state competition of mechanical drawers. And we're in this big room with drafting tables and items to look at, and we have to draw the schematic of that item. And some of them get really complicated. And I was getting my first, second, and third place, competing against 600 students. That's huge. So I'm talking to my counselor about this and how I'm really interested in architecture and design, and she looked up after writing a few notes and said, "You know what? I don't think that you want to do that. I think you want to work with your hands. So I'm gonna sign you up for wood shop."
I knew you were gonna say that.
And I'm like,
"Is that true?
Yeah."
Really? Like, that's
so
not, just
wood
faking
shops,
that
and I'm
story.
like, I'm not faking the story. This actually happened to me. And so after she said that, I was up like this, talking, engaged. When she said wood shop, I went like this. Sat back. Didn't listen to her. Whatever else she said after that, I didn't pay attention to. I said, "Okay, are we done?" And I left. Went home, told my parents immediately. My dad got on the phone immediately, called one of his, friends who happened to be a counselor at the high school. The very next day, I go walk into class, and a woman's out there in the hallway going like this. And I go out there thinking like, did I do something wrong? I'm your new counselor. Come see me after class. And she put me on a path of here you're gonna go to this job training thing. You're gonna join this organization. You're gonna be involved in this. So by the time I was by the time I graduated from high school, a week after graduation, I was interning in an advertising agency, a paid internship. I was just out of high school before I even got into college to pursue my major in communication design. I'm already interning at a major advertising firm in Chicago. And I had that internship.
And you
for
could
4
have just
summers.
done woodshop.
Yeah, I could have done woodshop and do vocational training and go build houses somewhere as a general contractor. Hopefully, I'll get a job.
So, I mean, you were lucky because I think so many of the kids who are involved in all this violence, they just don't. Their parents either don't, like you're my generation, and it seems like the generation now, a lot of the parents who are like young, single, all that stuff.
Well, some of it is it could be multiple things. Some of it is the sense that your teacher's the authority. So if the teacher says you're dumb, then I guess you're dumb, Or your teacher says you need to be in an underachieving class, so you need to be in there. There are not enough parents going out there they're afraid to advocate for the kids,
That's
or
right.
Themselves if they lack the education. And I'm not saying, I'm making
Right,
they may
right.
not and grew up in the same way
Right.
that you don't challenge authority.
Right.
Then I'm not going to go up to the school and advocate for my kid who I think is being unfairly treated, but the teacher knows best.
Right.
Or you have parents that are really struggling to get by. You have both parents working long hours, so they're not home with the kids to supervise and see what's going on. Where others who have more wealth can have one parent go to work and the other can stay home and be there all the time as a support. So when you have kids that go home, that is not really conducive for them to go home because it's not safe. So if you tell a kid you need to go home and do your homework, but that kid's afraid of being raped, what do you think they're going to do? They're not going to go home and do homework. They're going to try and get out there in the streets and survive the best they can. Schools close down after a while. They can't go there. They're kicked out of libraries. They're kicked out of places that they can stay in a safe space to do something. It's very hard to tell the kid then to pay attention to this. Or if they go home and there's nothing to eat, you got to figure out what you're going to eat. It's very hard to do homework when you're hungry. You get angry when you're hungry too. I mean, think about it. I mean, have you been ever so hungry that you're just irritated by everybody?
Mm-hmm.
You look at your husband and go like, leave me the heck alone,
Totally.
Before I punch you.
Right, I mean, it's just like they're very, very, your most basic human needs aren't met, so you're just...
Right, so you shut down.
Yeah, you're traumatized.
So imagine that on a daily or weekly basis. And you're in that constant state
So
of
what do you
just
think
anger.
we should do? Like, what do you think about like what I've heard from a lot of different people, police, community people, is there's 5 to 10 actual shooters in Evanston. Like, it's not
not a lot.
It's not all these kids.
Yeah, most police know who they are. It's like, yeah, we know that family. Yeah, we know that family.
So
You can't necessarily just get rid of a family. You can't sit there and say, you have to leave this community. That's
right, and they
do.
try to do that. Like, that's one of the things they try to do is, like, say, for your own safety, relocate, but then people don't want to relocate. So what, other than getting some serious gun control, or whatever it's called, gun legislation,
Control,
what could Evanston be doing for these kids who are going home and having nothing to eat, for these kids whose parents...
I think Evanston should really take a long assessment on the overall quality of Evanston life. Not just pockets here and there, but overall. Here's the big map of the community. Where are all the resources located? Map it out. Where are they getting their funding from? Map it out. How many of these are duplicates of service? Map it out. And then you start seeing where the blink spots are. What should we be doing here if this is all of Evanston? I think part of it, too, is to restructure city council. We have 9 aldermen in 9 wards. We should have at least 2 aldermen that are aldermen at large.
Like floating.
Yeah, floating. But think about Evanston as a city to take care of.
Has anybody ever thought of that? Is that your idea? Or?
No, I'm sure they thought of it before. I've talked to other city managers before Wally about that idea. One of them actually said that's very interesting. St. Louis does it. They have two aldermen at large. Because that way you can break up like partisanship and backroom dealings. I think aldermen should also have term limits.
Oh, do they not in Emerson?
No, you can be an alderman for as long as you're reelected, you can stay alderman.
Oh, right.
But I don't mind long-term serving alderman. Like I could see 3, 4 maybe tops.
Would you ever run for alderman?
No. My wife will leave me.
What is your wife?
This is enough for me. I mean,
my God!
This is a second. This is a second job. So being an alderman is like I said earlier.
The leadership.
The leadership and public service, hands down to everyone that does it. Even if I disagree with them, hands down to all of them.
Somebody just said that to me today. I do a lot of gun legislation stuff online, and somebody said, "Thanks so much for all you're doing. Why don't you run for office?" And I said, "Oh well." Never run for office. Never. I would never have the courage.
Because I would have to have a different type of position at work. I mean, Northwestern, as it is, gives me a lot of leeway with this. I get my work done; it doesn't interfere with work at all. But sometimes when I go to lunch, my boss, my director knows I come over here for lunch time a lot, and sit in here and do some stuff. She's like, she's telling somebody else like Dino doesn't necessarily go to lunch.
It's amazing.
He goes to his other thing.
What does your wife do?
She works in accounting in general, but she does H&R Block, tax consultant. My daughter's at the high school.
Oh, she is? Mm-hmm. What year?
She was starting her junior year.
Oh, what's her name?
Lauren
Robinson? My son's going to be a junior.
And she's an ice skater, so she skates a lot.
I would have to ask my son if she knows.
What is your son's name?
Micah Miller.
Okay. I'll ask her too.
He's not a very well-known kid, I don't think. But
Lauren's kind of like an interesting person.
Well, so is Micah.
I mean, she's well-known, but she wouldn't class herself, or I wouldn't class herself as popular.
Right.
But she's known and liked.
Right.
Like, oh, that's Lauren, the nice girl, the nice little small girl.
Like she's not hanging with the popular crowd.
She just hangs. I really try to impress that with her that I'd rather, pardon my language in this, I'd rather be known as a frigid bitch than a popular girl.
Did you say that?
Yeah, I said that to her. I said, here's the reason being is that the wild girl, you'll be used and abused. But you, if you're being a frigid, you'll be respected. And later on, he's the one, you'll be the one that he wants to take home to mom and dad to introduce properly and treat her with respect.
Does she hear that? Does she
hears
take
that from
in?
me.
No, does she get it?
Yeah, she gets it.
Oh, because
Yeah,
I think
I'm very blunt with my daughter.
So our son he has a friend who they've known since kindergarten, and she's a great girl, and I'm like, how do you and Shira, you would make such a cute couple, kind of joking
Michael
around.
Miller said?
Michael Miller. Micah. And they had started like over the summer at like 11:30 at night. He'd be like, "Oh, I'm going over to her house." And we're like, "It sounds like a booty call, if you ask me."
Yeah.
And we were like, "How about this? How about if you're going over to her house at 11:30, you also like see her at 4:00 in the afternoon?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how about that?
Right. Yeah. How about doing that?
What's going on with
How
that?
about meeting up at a coffee house and having a conversation?
Right.
I started doing that with first dates. That's why I tested out potential girlfriends. First date is always at a coffee house. Nothing fancy. Nothing fancy, and I'll pay for it, or we'll go Dutch. But I mean, it's simple: coffee and a scone. I've had and.
But does your daughter date?
Yeah, my daughter knows.
She does.
Yeah.
Oh, great. So what's he like?
And
He's in camp. He's at camp for a month.
Okay.
That's so funny.
To his mom right now.
I hope she doesn't say he's an asshole. He's a
I think, but see, the reason why I said that, because I think I remember her talking about him one day.
Really?
Not in a bad way. It's like, yeah, he's nice, but he's quiet.
Yeah, he went to a Jewish day school until high school, and so he came in with not knowing anybody. He's starting to
open up
a little bit. Yeah, we'll see.
So yeah, small world. Half a degree of separation in Evanston. That's one thing.
What?
Half a degree of separation. Have you heard 6 degrees
Totally,
of separation?
totally.
It's half a degree of separation here.
Oh my God.
You can't talk about anybody without it going like, that's my cousin, brother, sister's niece, not something, whatever. Just don't say anything bad unless you already have that built-in relationship with them and say, yeah, you know your cousin.
You got to be
yeah,
so...
you know he's up to no good. Like, yeah, you're right, Dino, you're right. I mean, I can say that with a lot of people who I know. I mean, in doing what we're doing here, we get to know families pretty well. And what these families appreciate is our confidentiality. Building that trust.
So do you work with Lonnie Wilson?
We've had many conversations back and forth, and yeah, I love him. He can be a loose cannon.
He's a total loose cannon. I love him.
And he knows it. He knows it. He owns it. And we'll talk at times and say, look, you're needed. Your voice is needed in the community. In that way, it needs it from all fronts. We need the scholarly, we need the middle ground, and we need Alani, who's going to say it bluntly as it is, whether it's correct or incorrect, but it gets people talking, whether you like it or not. He's going to put
He's
you
on
He's
target
going to put you.
a lot of
He's
times.
going to put you on point and make you talk about it.
I know.
And make you feel uncomfortable. He likes that. He wants that to happen. My personality is like, I try and approach in a way where I don't want to have you put up a brick wall. I want you to talk, and I want you to be as honest with me as possible, and I want to be as honest with you as possible, with the premise of, I'm not trying to offend you, scare you off, or piss you off.
Right.
Know that I have a very different opinion from you. Respect it. And I respect your opinion, even if I think it's totally wrong.
I know. I think that's the thing with Lonnie is that the other day I posted something. He posted something. I was like, Lonnie, I totally disagree with you. And I was, he's like, stop with all the rallies and the dinners and I'm like, I get it. I get where you're coming from. Like, put the money into the Fifth Ward, but the dinners and the rallies, they also make a difference. This constant talking makes a difference. In smaller ways, and I'm not saying they should be in place of what you want, but like I had organized a rally and I had organized the dinners, and I took it really personally, and so I typed something up and I'm like, geez, I'm on Lonnie's page with all these African Americans and I'm this like random white chick who suddenly shows up.
You're the deer in the middle of a field with a whole lot of lions surrounding you.
I totally read all this. I think
I saw that banter back and forth.
But I deleted it. I was like,
but I think I saw it as a building because I think Doria Johnson got involved in it. I think
Doria Johnson.
Yeah, so there's some things in there.
Doria annoys me because she's like not voting, and I'm like, I don't even know her, but I'm like, you gotta vote for God's sake.
She's one of our resident scholar here, and it's like, I want her. I mean, she's passionate. She's well informed. But yeah, I think what you're hearing from all that ranter really is that the dialogue of stop talking rallies and actually do something. And it's because that's what we're told all the time. And like for the last 100 years in Evanston, we'll talk about it some more. We'll put on a referendum. We'll vote on it. We'll just, one person that came to me, I think one time I was talking about the Fifth Ward School. And this one older white woman came up to me and said, you know what your problem is that your community is not advocating enough for it. And I said, no, we've been advocating it for the last 100 years, but you're not interested and you don't care. And she kind of was taken aback by that. And it's like, it's true. You haven't, because it doesn't affect you.
Well, I think also, what I think the problem is, because even my very own little self was thinking the other day, well, like I said to you, where the heck he is or whatever. I don't know Hickey. I've never met him. I don't know anything about who.
You've probably seen him though. But you've probably seen him.
I have seen him, and I eat his food, and I need to meet him, and I want to meet him. But so I'm thinking, like people like Lonnie will go, well, we're the wealthy white people, why aren't they investing? And I'm like, well, we're the wealthy black people, why aren't they investing? And then I think, I've just totally lost my train of thought.
I think those same wealthy black people are being leaned on so much all the time that there's only so much they can do.
And there aren't that many of them.
Right.
Like, they're way more wealthy white people.
And there's a lot of people in the community. We have a lot of younger generation leaving Evanston. So those who become wealthy or well off leave Evanston and start their lives elsewhere.
Lonnie
because that is not happening here. There are many as with the circles I walk in a lot of times with community activity and advocacy. Sometimes I'm put in a position where I can see this sense of like I'm in a room with people who grew up with privilege and never had a worry in the world. So I saw a reaction where there is an entity. I want to say entities without name because this community is too small. You'll be able to know what they are. This one entity asked this other entity for money and got it like that at the table as we spoke. Oh, I have this bright idea. Why don't we hire somebody to do this? And I think you could fund it if you give us $10,000. Oh yeah, we can do that with 10,000. We'll monitor it, and next year we'll see if we do another 10 or 20,000. Now I went to that same entity many times with this, begging just for an audience, and I know them. No doors open. Not even a conversation as a potential. But I'm sitting in this room and boom, right there, it's taken care of. No paperwork, no grant, just done. So when you have that sense of power structure and privilege, that network within an insulated cell,
Totally.
I mean, and there's another woman too that did something over at Dewey, and kind of restarted this reading program that she was doing, and she realized too, like I'm a middle class white woman.
Was it that breakfast? Books and breakfast?
Yeah, books and breakfast. Yeah, Kim.
something?
Yeah.
I need to
So
interview her too.
she even said, it's like
She
I'm a
can
middle
get the
class
money.
privileged white woman. I can go to my friends and get funded tomorrow. What you're doing, Dino, I know you're asking the same exact people, and they're ignoring you.
But I find that really weird. Like it just seems like this is such a gem. Like it should be sponsored by the city, for God's sake.
That's the relationship we're working on really hard. We want the city to understand that this is what
It's kind of like a public library.
This is what you do with public advocacy. The city is in the best position to indicate in the grant that we want Shorefront to benefit from this. We have a structure that they can have. We'll give it to them. If we write this grant and say $2, $3, $4, $5 million, this could last 10 years for the way they want to set up and operate. It's not a money-making thing. We want to be able to pay a director, a programs person, to do things on a consistent basis here. I don't want to be the director. I like being behind the scene and collecting these archives. I love doing that. I love talking to families, bringing them in, organizing people to get it processed and made available for people to use. I need a director that understands finances and can, ask for the big money, understand all the grant reporting. I want a program person that can take these things into the schools and make a curriculum out of it, an ongoing program that all the kids can learn from it at age, in second grade, fourth grade, seventh grade, and 10th grade. And adults, and it has one for adults.
So crazy that it's so hard.
And it's like, this is a benefit and we don't service, and we have to look even bigger because we service the entire North Shore. So we have a dream that all 7 suburban communities along the lakefront, from Evanston to Lake Forest, out of their general budget, just contribute $5,000 to $10,000 a year. That's a small blip in their
Are you
overall
asking
budget.
for this?
This is what we're trying to do this as. But each community has a different setup. Like Glencoe, the city does not give to any nonprofit in the city. You have to do it a different way. So you have to understand each of those. So, but I was just saying in broad strokes, if we had that, we're working with $70,000 right there off the bat. That can do worlds here.
I mean,
I could hire
you should just
somebody
be
full time
above the
here.
ground.
Yeah, and we want to be on the street level.
And you shouldn't be like
In
this tiny little
a
door. I had
modern
no
in a
idea where
modern
you
yeah
were.
in a modern facility
Right.
that attract people to come. And so we are working on plans on that. We are working with a architect that's volunteering their time to draw out the floor plan and the elevation of what our dream is to have. Modest. I mean, we're not talking about we don't want like a 50,000 square foot facility. We want something that's maybe a little bit larger than this, where we have room for archives, room for programming, adaptable space that we could do things
Like
in.
events.
I want it to be stunning. I want to have a water feature. I want to have a natural
African
garden.
art.
I want to have a rooftop garden. I want to use lots of glass. I want like one full wall to be all nothing but glass.
Now, would you put yourself in the Fifth Ward?
Yeah, definitely.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
I know exactly where I can go. You know, it's like it can go right here, and then if we attach it to this building, we could have the entire building and do a lot of wonderful things with
But
it.
now, is this what you're talking to the city about?
Yes.
And was this entity?
It's slow.
Was the entity Evanston Community Foundation?
I'm not saying anything else.
I don't hardly know them, but like
Yeah.
I'm like, why?
I plead the fifth.
Okay.
Like I said, it's too small of a community to talk about it.
Wow.
But it's interesting to see. Again, you know, with the privileged circle, then it's about control. So for a long time, because you know, these entities like, well, we don't know who the people on your board, so we don't trust it. I'm like, well, you want me to put Bill Logan on there again? Bill Logan's on everything. He doesn't want to be on everything. We need new leadership. We have new leadership on this board. Of course, you don't know them, but you should know them. Just because you don't know them does not mean they're not
Good.
You know, good. Or you know, I mean, they kept it running this long. It's wonderful what they did, and the stuff that they're providing. You know, they can't provide the big dollars, but they're providing services that cost big dollars to do. I mean, we have a musician that every time we had a music event, he arranged it all at no cost. You know how much it is to get a music venue together? You got to pay the artist and all this stuff. He's able to do that for us. We have a photographer and a cinematographer. Anything we do and everything we do is filmed and videotaped. That costs money.
Do you do interviews with families?
Yeah, we interviewed families. We've interviewed, every time we have an event here, we film it. So we have a speaking engagement, we film it. I mean, how much does it cost to get a filmer to come in and set up the gear to capture it and then, you know, mix it down to a DVD? That costs, you know, easy $5,000, you know. But and we do that 5 times a year. That's, you know, $25,000 right there. That in itself is a service that, you know, we're getting free because of the board members. We have educators that understand things. We have people in corporate that understand corporate. We have in our advisories, there are, you know, attorneys, scholars, you know, and a pastor that's retiring from here. Are on an advisory board where we call and say, hey, I have questions. You know, even our publishing, we have, you know, since I'm at the press, but also have another colleague that's a advisory who, you know, shares with us, like, here's what you need to do. So those are, you know, services that we receive to keep Shorefront running. And then our volunteers who, just like you said, they're stunned when they come down here. They finish their volunteer, you know, criteria they have to do for school, and then they end up staying even longer. We had one intern that stayed for 4 years.
Do they? Do you do events like where you can get a group of people together and then you would come? I mean, you did it for the Leadership Evanston thing. Like, you would come and what did you do for Leadership Evanston? You gave us a history of the
I did a bit of history. I think it was always the timeline thing.
Yeah, we did that timeline
So
thing.
I put some more context behind a lot of things that people were talking about.
Like, I don't know.
I think this one we did
Group of
more.
my friends together and have you kind of talk to them. Like,
I do have like I have prepared presentations for that. I did one over at Northwestern last week for the library and archivists that were there, and they were just stunned.
So would you do it? Like, if I got a
dean
bunch
was
of, you know, I don't know, white women from Northwest Evanston together and said, do you want to know about the history of the African American community in Evanston?
Yeah,
Dino
no
Robinson's
problem,
coming.
no problem.
I've got to think about. I really would love to do that. There's so many things I want to do. And I'm like just Dear Evanston. I'm me, and I don't. I'm not a nonprofit. I'm not in anything. I'm just a person.
You get students to work on Dear Evanston?
I'm dying for students. I need interns.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
People.
Our journal is online. It's open for the community to write, but it's hard to find people to want to write something.
I know. Like, I would love it if I love doing these interviews because then I actually get to meet people. But I'm like, it would be so great if I was having 3 people interviewing at the same time. I could get so many stories.
Right.
Okay. So I don't know what time it is, but I've kept you waiting.
So after it's 1:20. I have to get to the
Okay.
I have to get to the high school
Now.
I think it's a 2:00 meeting, but I think they changed it to 1. I don't know.
I feel like we had more of an
confused.
interview than. I mean, we had more of a discussion than an interview. So I don't know how.
Well,
I'm gonna
no, it's
write this
fine.
up.
I mean, you'll just write up as a story.
I'm gonna
Freeform it.
Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about, like your childhood and what are your parents? Are you connected to Robinson Bus?
That's one of the main questions we get asked all the time. No, we have no relationship to that.
What is that's an Evanston Bus company?
Yeah, Evanston Bus Company.
That's so funny.
When I first moved to Evanston, that was the first question I was always asked. Are you related to them? No. And then
So-
they just walk away from me.
So your dad, what did your dad worked in corporate
Yes. And my mom was a teacher.
and your mom was a teacher, okay? And you okay? I did not ask you nearly enough things. I just like
I have a younger brother. I have a younger brother. He lives in Denver now. He went to high school. He went to Lincoln Elementary, and then Nichols, and then the high school. When I came here, I finished my 8th grade at Nichols, and then went to the high school.
And did you? What was I going to ask you? You went to Loyola.
I live by the high school right now with my wife.
Oh, you do?
My daughter. Yeah.
So that's second ward.
Yeah, fifth
ward.
ward. Fifth ward. If we cross the street, we'll be in the second ward.
You know what I'm going to do when I listen back to this? Because obviously this is like way too long to put together. But I might send you a couple of questions, and then you can just type the
questions. Just feel free to do so.
Okay.
Not a problem at all.
All right. It's like more. I kind of actually feel like I want to put something up about Shorefront, and it might be very short. I need to take a photo of you too, though.